The American radar operator stared at his screen. It was clean. It was perfect. There were no blips, no warnings, no enemies. High above the Nevada desert, the sky belonged to the United States Air Force. This was Red Flag, the most advanced aerial combat exercise on the planet. The Americans had deployed their absolute best fighters, the F-15 Eagle, a jet that had never been defeated in air-to-air combat. They had the highest ground. They had the most powerful sensors. They had missiles that could kill from 50 miles away. They were confident that nothing could get past them. Then, the radio crackled with a sound that froze the room. Target Alpha destroyed. Target Bravo destroyed. The American pilots looked around frantically. Who hit them? Where did it come from? I have nothing on my scope. There were no contrails in the sky, no missile smoke, no heat signatures, just empty blue space. But down below, hidden in the chaotic noise of the desert floor, something had just slipped through the most secure net in the world. It wasn't a stealth fighter. It wasn't a futuristic drone. It was a bulky, ugly, boxy jet that the Americans had laughed at just hours before. They called it the bomb truck. They said it was too slow to survive a modern war. They said it was a relic of the past. But on that day, the RAF Tornado didn't just survive. It humiliated the mighty F-15 Eagle. It proved that while the Americans owned the sky, the British owned the dirt. How did a jet from the 1970s blind the world's most advanced air force? How did they become invisible without stealth technology? Welcome to the Hidden Valor. To understand the shock of that day, you first have to understand the massive difference between these two machines. It was a classic case of Goliath versus David. On one side, you had the F-15 Eagle. It was a Ferrari of the skies. It was built for one purpose: air dominance. It had massive engines that could push it straight up like a rocket. Its radar was designed to look down and spot targets from miles away. American doctrine was simple: fly high, see everything, kill it before it sees you. On the other side, you had the Tornado. To an American pilot, the Tornado looked like a mistake. It was heavy. It was boxy. It had variable sweep wings that looked complicated. It wasn't agile. If an F-15 and a Tornado got into a turning dogfight, the Tornado would die in seconds. But the Tornado wasn't built for dogfights. It was born out of fear. During the Cold War, British military planners looked at the map of Europe and realized a terrifying truth. If the Soviet Union attacked, they would send thousands of surface-to-air missiles. The sky over Europe would become a kill zone. Any jet flying high would be blown out of the air in seconds. So, the British decided to do the unthinkable. They decided to give up the sky. They built a jet designed to fly, where no one else dared to go, 100 feet off the ground. While American pilots were training to fly in the clear blue skies of Nevada, British pilots were training in the rainy, foggy valleys of Scotland and Germany. They learned to fly at 500 miles per hour, skimming the treetops, often in pitch-black darkness. They had a secret weapon that the Americans underestimated. It wasn't a missile. It wasn't a gun. It was a computer system called Terrain Following Radar, or TFR. The TFR was the heart of the Tornado. It was a reason this bomb truck became a ghost. Here's how it worked. The pilot would punch a command into the computer 100 feet. Then he would do something that went against every instinct a pilot has. He would take his hands OFF the stick. Imagine driving a car at 500 miles per hour, blindfolded, while a computer steers you inches away from a brick wall. That is what flying a Tornado felt like. The radar in the nose would scan the ground ahead. If it saw a hill, it pulled the jet up. If it saw a valley, it pushed the jet down. It hugged the contour of the earth like a second skin. For the British crews, this required nerves of steel. If the system failed, at that speed and altitude, the pilot had 0.4 seconds to react before slamming into the ground. It was a terrifying way to fly, but it came with a massive advantage: invisibility. You see, radar works by sending out waves. But radar waves cannot travel through mountains. They cannot look through rocks. If you can put a mountain between you and the enemy radar, you are invisible. The Americans knew this theory, of course, but they didn't practice it like the British. To an American pilot, flying at 100 feet was an emergency maneuver. To a British pilot, it was their natural habitat. When the RAF arrived at Red Flag, the American commanders were polite but dismissive. They looked at the Tornado specs and shrugged. "It's a target," one F-15 pilot joked. "A slow, low-flying target. We'll pick them off like ducks in a barrel." They set up their defenses. They put the F-15s high up in combat air patrols. They turned on their massive AWACS radar planes. They created a wall of eagles that nothing could penetrate, or so they thought. The mission began. The American F-15s were circling at 30,000 feet. Their radars were in look-down mode, scanning the desert floor. They were waiting for the blips. But radar has a weakness. It's called ground clutter. When a radar looks down at the Earth, it sees thousands of reflections. Rocks, cars, buildings, even heat waves rising from the desert sand. All of these create noise on the screen. To find a jet hiding in that noise is like trying to find a specific grain of sand on a beach. The Tornadoes dove straight into the clutter. They didn't fly in a straight line. They flew like water flowing down a drain. They snaked through the winding canyons of Nevada. They banked hard around stone pillars. They flew so low that they were actually below the rim of the canyons. Up in the AWACS plane, the American controllers were getting frustrated. "I have a contact. Wait, lost it. Ghost contact on vector 310. No, that's just a truck." "Where are they?" The Tornadoes were using the blink effect. They would pop up over a ridge for 1 second, just long enough for the American radar to see a flash, and then dive back down into the shadow of the next valley. The American computers couldn't lock on. Every time the F-15s tried to get a missile lock, the Tornado would vanish behind a rock. The American pilots were forced to dive down. They left their high-altitude sanctuary and came down into the dirt to hunt the British. But this was a mistake. The F-15 was a big bird. At low altitude, the air is thick and turbulent. The Eagle struggled to turn. It was out of its element. The Tornado, however, was built for this thick air. With its wings swept back, it cut through the turbulence like a knife. While the Americans were fighting their own jets, trying not to hit the ground, the British computers were flying the plane perfectly. The RAF navigators were calmly calling out checkpoints. Turning point 4. On time. On target. They slipped right underneath the wall of eagles. The climax happened in seconds. The Tornadoes reached the kill box, the simulated enemy airfield protected by SAM sites and F-15s. Suddenly, the British jets popped up. They climbed from 100 feet to 500 feet in a heartbeat. This maneuver was called the toss. They simulated the release of their runway cratering bombs. Weapons away. Braking left. Before the American air defenses could even wake up, the Tornadoes rolled inverted and dove back into the safety of the canyons. The radio calls started coming in. Target destroyed. Runway destroyed. Command center destroyed. The F-15s were furious. They lit their afterburners. They dove on the fleeing British jets, desperate to get a kill, desperate to save some pride. But it was too late. The Tornadoes were running for the border at Mach 1.2, kicking up dust storms behind them. They used the terrain to mask their escape just as they had masked their approach. One American pilot later admitted, "We were chasing ghosts. We knew where they should be, but we couldn't see them, and you can't kill what you can't see." By the time the F-15s got a solid radar lock, the Tornadoes were already crossing the safety line. Mission accomplished. The debriefing room was quiet. There was no laughing about bomb trucks anymore. The screen showed the replay. It was humiliating for the USAF. The blue lines, Americans, were flying in circles confused. The red lines, British, were straight, fast, and deadly arrows piercing the heart of the defense. The RAF had proven a point that changed modern warfare. They proved that technology is not invincibility. You can have the best radar, the fastest engine, and the most expensive missile. But if your enemy has the discipline to fly where you are afraid to follow, you will lose. The American pilots learned to respect the ugly, boxy jet from Europe. They realized that the Tornado's weakness was actually its strength. It didn't try to dominate the sky. It simply ignored the sky completely. For years, The story of the tornado at Red Flag became a legend. It was a day the old school beat the high tech. The Tornado is retired now. The skies are filled with stealth fighters like the F-35 and F-22, but the lesson remains. Stealth isn't just a coating on your wings. Stealth is a mindset. It is a courage to trust your machine, hold your nerve, and embrace the dirt. The F-15 owned the air, but the Tornado owned the war. If you enjoyed this story of British engineering shocking the world, make sure to subscribe. Which philosophy would you choose? The high-flying eagle or the low-flying ghost? Let us know in the comments below.